One.
Hey everybody, it's Ann Beebe. Today is Saturday, January 10th, January 11th, rather, 2020. My name is Barb Hammer. It's been over a week since I've done a video, and I apologize again. I'm stuck in a hotel while our apartment is being repaired and renovated. Only that's a fiasco. I don't even want to go into that. I'm stuck here for a couple of months. And last time I did a video, I was in a different room, and the very next day. So the last time I did a video was just New Year's Day, I think, and on the Wednesday. And then the very next day, Thursday, the hotel phone said, "Oh, you're going to have to move to another room because there are actually renovations going on here, too." So I'm going to call myself a renovation refugee. But at least I have a roof over my head. The problem is finding space to do these videos. So I'm trying to do this right now while my husband has gone to our apartment, which is basically just a big storage unit. And he's getting some things, and he likes to paint, so that's his hobby, and so he's painting. I've tried to make this video several times, and I've tried to find space in the hotel. I went to the breakfast room, but it's a little too busy, even after hours. So anyway, so today I want to talk about the elections in Taiwan. Because of the time difference, we already know the results. So people voted. I'm on the west coast of North America, and so it's Taiwan is practically a day ahead. So I'm going to talk about Taiwan in connection with Hong Kong, the Hong Kong protests, that color revolution, that terrorism that's going on. China, and it connects up also with other color revolutions, both in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Ukraine. And I'm in another video, I'm going to make the connection between China and Iran. So I've been watching what's going on in Iran. So anyway, today, the Taiwan elections. So the results are that the incumbent, who's the head of the Democratic Progressive Party, which is neither, it's a party, all right, but it's not democratic or progressive, really. It's neoliberal. It's a Western neoliberal party, kind of like the Democratic Party. Yeah, I would say it's like the Democratic Party, which is not democratic in the U.S. Anyway, so President Tsai Ing-wen, she won a second term against her opponent, Kuo-yu, who is the head of the Kuomintang. And the interesting thing about the Kuomintang is that it's Chiang Kai-shek's old party. So Chiang Kai-shek, when was defeated by Mao's forces on the mainland in 1949, and so he fled to Taiwan, and Taiwan is part of China. So Taiwan was kind of split off from China and made into this like puppet regime for the U.S. really. But since then, the Kuomintang has changed quite a bit, and so in this election, President Tsai was kind of like a Hillary Clinton candidate. So she was the first woman president. So it's all about identity politics. So she's a woman, and it's kind of ridiculous because they call her like the Iron Cat Lady. She has lots of cats, and I think she has a dog or two. I don't know, but she's known as the Cat Lady, and you always see images of her with a cat. And there are even like Japanese anime art for the campaign. I don't know, the showing her with a cat, Japanese. She's like Japanese anime. It's just ridiculous. So this election, things were not looking good for her actually. Like 6 months ago, she's very corrupt, and she promotes a neoliberal economic policy, which includes austerity, and the economy in Taiwan is not doing well because she also is trying to keep tensions raised with China and keep Taiwan separate from China. But Taiwan's biggest trading partner is actually China, and so she's hurting the economy by keeping it separate and increasing these tensions with China. And there are actually a lot of Taiwanese who work and do business on the mainland. I think something like 5%, maybe more. So Taiwan is very connected to China. It is China, and the Chinese government still considers Taiwan part of China, which it is. It's China. Taiwan is China. But President Tsai is like a puppet of the U.S., and so she does whatever the U.S. and Western propagandists want. So she was not doing well. It didn't look good for her. She was not expected to win until the Hong Kong protests started. And so they started doing a lot of fear mongering about China and that the one country, two system was autocratic, and there's all this Chinese tyranny in Hong Kong, when it's just the opposite. There's actually democracy in Hong Kong, and there wasn't democracy under British colonial rule, and they have elections, and people vote like they did in the council elections last year in Hong Kong. And but the economic system in Hong Kong is very much like a Western neoliberal economy, and so people are not doing well, kind of like in Taiwan. So you see the parallels there. So the Taiwan economy is suffering from being kept separate from China, and so is the Hong Kong economy. So anyway, so she won re-election, and her party actually surprisingly won the legislature too, won a majority in the legislature. So I would compare her. So her contender, Mr. Han, he is kind of like a Bernie Sanders populist, and so he was talking about the economy and bread and butter issues, and he's very plain spoken, and he had that appeal. But they were trying to undermine him because he wants closer ties with China. He doesn't want this tension, and so he lost. His party lost in the legislature, and this big turnaround happened 6 months ago in the Hong Kong protests, which is really CIA, Western intelligence, and NGOs, terrorism. It's a color revolution, is what it is. And the interesting thing is that so on Jeff J. Brown's China Rising blog here, so he talked about so he made this Taiwan, Hong Kong, Ukraine color revolution connection, and he was talking about the imagery. So there are these neo-Nazis or Nazis who arrived in Hong Kong in support of the Hong Kong terrorists. That's interesting, you know. There was the Maidan Revolution in the winter of 2013, 2014 in Ukraine, and that overthrew a government that was close to Russia. And so the West sponsored this color revolution to overthrow that government and install a government that would be pro-Western and anti-Russian, but it's got a lot of Nazis that support that government. So there's this imagery of the swastika, and Jeff talked about the images of the sunflowers. And that's an interesting image to talk about because the sunflower, so here he shows a Facebook page that's in Ukrainian that's in support of the Hong Kong protests. And so the image of the sunflower. So he spotted this. This is in Hong Kong, and it says "Sunflower Hong Kong." That was in Hong Kong, and that is actually in reference to a symbol of the sunflower student movement that took place in Taiwan in 2014. So in 2014, there was this sunflower student movement in Taiwan, and that was another color revolution. And at the same year, there was the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong, and that was another Western color revolution. Which is color revolution basically is when you make a Western regime change operation look like a popular uprising. And Tiananmen Square in 1989 was another one. And that was Gene Sharp's first. So he came up with the color revolution, or he perfected it. So in 1989 in Tiananmen Square, that was another Western regime change operation to overthrow the Chinese government. So anyway, so 2014, Sunflower Student Movement in Taiwan, and the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong. So they had this symbol, so you'll see in these color revolutions, they often will use imagery, symbols. So Jeff talked about that, and he made that connection between Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Ukraine. So anyway, I'm talking about the Taiwan elections, but connecting it to Hong Kong. So they really pulled out all the stops to scaremonger about China and Taiwan for the elections. And so they brought up a lot of imagery about what's going on in Hong Kong, and saying, oh no, there's all this China's interfering. And yeah, so they say the same thing. It's like in 2016 that Russia interfered in the US elections, and Russia's been interfering in Western elections. Well, in Asia, they say that China is interfering. And so they say that in Hong Kong, and they say that in Taiwan. And there's a lot of scaremongering when it's actually the opposite. It's the US and the West that's interfering in these elections. So they brought up a lot of things, propaganda that was been used in the news. So there's this Simon Cheng, who was working at the British consulate in Hong Kong, and he was arrested on the mainland. He apparently traveled often, and I think he was probably an MI6 British intelligence agent or asset. And he would travel often to the Chinese mainland, and he was caught with a couple of prostitutes, and I call him the horn dog. And so I don't know. I wonder too if he wasn't set up. China might have known about how he likes prostitutes, and they might have set him up and arrested him. He claimed he was tortured. He wasn't. He was simply questioned, detained for a while, and then he was released. And he claims that his family members have been harassed and threatened. So he gave an exclusive interview with the CIA Falun Gong cult outlet Epoch Times, and told about his problems. The other thing they brought up was this, so this Chinese spy, supposedly a Chinese spy who defected to Australia. And so he came out just before the election in Taiwan and claimed that he was being threatened to retract his story. And his story has been falling apart, and I think that's why they keep trying to prop it up. He's too young. He doesn't have the educational background to be what he claims he was, and he doesn't even speak Cantonese. If he was supposedly an operative in Hong Kong, he can't even speak Cantonese. He just speaks standard Chinese that's spoken on the mainland, and he can't even speak English. He's in Australia. His wife is a student there, and they have a young son. So he just doesn't have the education, and to claim what he claims, you'd have to be a much older person to have that responsibility. So they just pulled out all the stops, pulling all the propaganda about China for this Taiwan election. And so anyway, the other thing, so another thing is the thing about Taiwan, it's an outpost for regime change operations and destabilization campaigns in Asia against China. And so Taiwan there were supplies and money being sent to Hong Kong for the terrorism, the protests. And some of the terrorists were trying to get away. If it looked like they might be arrested, they were fleeing to Taiwan. And this all started because there's no extradition treaty between Hong Kong and Taiwan. And so those two locations are like safe havens. So, if they get into trouble in one place, they can flee to Taiwan. If they get into trouble in Taiwan, and they can flee to Hong Kong. And it started because there was a young man who killed his wife or girlfriend who was pregnant, and he killed her in Taiwan, and then he fled back to Hong Kong. So there were supposedly these election tourists from Hong Kong who were taking part in the campaign, and but this is from the Hong Kong Free Press, which is basically a Western NGO propaganda outlet. Um, so yeah, these tourists. So there were a lot of people going to Taiwan for the elections. Some of them were Taiwanese who were going back to vote. Um, but the tourists, I think they were there to kind of prop up President Tsai's campaign. And I think her numbers were not good at her rallies. It kind of reminded me of Hillary Clinton. And so Mr. Han's numbers at his rallies were much bigger, but he still lost. And I'm wondering about those elections, really. The other thing is the other thing was, yes. So once again, from the Hong Kong Free Press, yeah. So they talked about there were actually some of the terrorists, the Hong Kong terrorists and ringleaders, were trying to go to Taiwan to observe the election if it'll come up. I'm not sure if this is going to come up. Anyway, there's an image. I'm trying to get to come up. And maybe not. Here it is. Okay. So Lily Wong. So she was involved in the trashing of the legislature building on July 1st of last year. And so she was not allowed to, she was stopped at the airport, arrested when she tried to go to observe the election in Taiwan. And I'm wondering, I remember last year in the council elections in Hong Kong, there are these people who support the terrorism, the supposedly pro-democracy terrorism in Hong Kong, and they were they were involved in voter suppression. So I'm wondering if these people who were trying to go to Taiwan weren't going to try to carry up some voter suppression in Taiwan. And so anyway, so they really pulled out all the stops in Taiwan, and they turned things around for President Tsai. So she got elected, her party got elected, and the populist, Mr. Han, he was defeated, and he's kind of like a Bernie Sanders style candidate. And he actually used Barack Obama's slogan in English, "Yes, we can." So they actually played upon the ignorance of young people. So that Sunflower Student Movement, what they do is they brainwash young people, and they've done this in Hong Kong, and they use younger and younger people in Hong Kong, even little kids. So this is what they're doing now. It's kind of like, the crayon revolution, a pedo revolution. So they're brainwashing young people and getting younger and younger people involved, high school kids and little, even younger, for these regime change operations, and to swing elections the other way when it looks like a certain pro-Western, pro-US candidate might lose. They interfere, and they claim China's interfering. Anyway, that's what happened in Taiwan. So it was the big lie propaganda machine against China, a lot of scaremongering against China to get the incumbent reelected. So that's the sad reality of Taiwan and Hong Kong, and it's all connected to Ukraine and other color revolutions, regime change operations. So I'm going to talk about Iran. I'm going to tie, in other videos, I'm going to tie in China to Iran. So what's going on in Iran, and I've been watching what's going on in Iran. It's very much connected to China. So you see these countries, the main countries that are demonized in Western propaganda are China, Iran, and Russia. Those are the big three. Now, there are others that are brought up. Right now, Turkey's being demonized too. So, but the big three, I think, are China, Iran, and Russia. And there is a connection between all three. But I'm going to start to talk about the connection between Iran and China and the propaganda about those countries, and how people are just brainwashed about what's going on in Iran and China. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm just trying to get back in the swing. I'm making videos again. I'll make more. I've just got to get in the habit of when I have some time alone in the room to do a video. So my husband goes up to do some painting for several hours in an afternoon. So I've just got to use that time to make a video, and I'm going to start to do more writing. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye.